105.3 FM in New Orleans. Tonight, we will be welcoming David Weatherly, who returns to the show, and Ross Allison, who will be new to the show. We will be discussing different types of hauntings and haunting locations or haunted locations. So I'm looking forward to that. It's always a good time. So settle in for a great segment. In order to participate in the show, you will have to pop over to the United Paranormal Radio Network YouTube page, subscribe, and then get yourself in the chat room so you can interact with us and our guests. If you have any questions or comments, please remember to tag Amelia to get her attention, and that way she can relay your questions and comments to the guests throughout the show. So I know Joe is just going to be bringing them on, so we're going to just sit tight. I'm kind of looking forward to this. It's always a pleasure having David Weatherly on because he's just a wealth of information. He's just a lot of fun, and we know that our listeners just love him. So,
oh yeah, they've been looking forward to this.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. UFO Bigfoot. Hello, how are you? And chat nice and early. Thanks for hanging in with us. Joe's been a bit delayed trying to get everything going. Everything is crazy in the South right now, and we are out of New Orleans. There's a few little hiccups along the way, so we're trying to get ourselves on track.
Hi guys.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hello.
Hello.
How are you? I'm just going to do a quick intro for the audience. Joining us tonight is David Weatherly. He is a Renaissance man of the strange and supernatural. He has traveled the world in pursuit of ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, magic, and more. From the specters of dusty castles to remote haunted islands, from ancient sites to modern mysteries, he has journeyed to the most unusual places on the globe seeking the unknown. And joining him tonight is Ross Allison, who has been lecturing for power performers since 2004 and has spoken to thousands of students at hundreds of colleges and universities throughout the USA on his ghost hunting adventures and teaches a class based on his book, Ghostology 101. Through his travels, he has had opportunities to work with some of the biggest names in the field, such as Jason and Grant of Ghost Hunters fame. He has also investigated some of the scariest and most haunted sites known to man. The Stanley Hotel and Amityville House are just a few of those, where he captures some of the scariest phenomena he has ever encountered. Please welcome David Weatherly and Ross Allison to the Outer Realm. Hello,
hey
guys. How are you?
Sorry.
I'm losing my voice. Yeah,
I know. It's cold here. We're buried in snow, so.
Of course you are.
I know, it's ridiculous. Honestly, I'm a little worried for all our friends in Texas. I usually have a weekly, meditation and meeting with a friend of mine, and every Wednesday, and I didn't hear from him, and he's in Austin. Like, oh my God! So it turns out that there, no power, no heat, no nothing. Oh, hi, Ross.
There we
How are
go,
you?
Ross.
There's no power there or something.
I know it.
No, I sent Nick a message, Nick Redfern, because I'm like, I haven't heard from you. Are you buried under any of this? But I haven't heard back from him yet.
Texas friends,
So,
that's
yeah,
right.
so I'm just like, if there's anything I can do, let me know. I've been watching those videos online, and I can't believe what's going on.
The whole world's going crazy. That's all. It's just a little bit crazy.
Well, Greece, Santorini got snow. Cyprus got snow. Italy and Rome had snow yesterday. So, yeah, there's a little bit of fact to that climate change thing,
Maybe. So, wow. Well, David, of course, you're like, you have a frequent flyer here with us, and Ross is here. So welcome. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So where do you guys want to start? Let's start with, how did you end up, connecting up to collaborate on this series of books? They look interesting. I'm dying.
I tell you that.
I can barely hear you, Ross.
Oh, really? Hold on a second. Let me hook up my better mic here.
Excellent.
So he's pulling out the big guns just for you.
I am.
That's pretty quick. It takes me like 50 minutes before Joe even calls to get everything going.
Oh, I know.
Well, we're used to being in a studio. Now I'm in my office. Michelle's in her medieval room. Like this is because of COVID, right? We're used to being in a studio where we don't have everything's already set up for us. So
but I have better sound here. Us. Yeah, I'm not going back.
But yeah, surprisingly, we do have better sound at home.
Oh my God, it's true. We do. The walls of this house are like 3 feet thick. So it's just a big old, Gothic house. I'm thinking I'm never going to get sound like this again. So okay. Question was, how did you guys end up together to collaborate on what looks to be a really amazing series of books with all your haunted tales and such?
Well, like I said, David was stalking me and decided,
No comment from David.
I'll never message you.
No, it was actually he was in Seattle and wanted to take my tour, and I had heard of David. And I was like, "Oh, this is great! I get to do a private tour for David and a friend of his." And I know he really enjoyed the tour, and I guess I had purchased my book, Spooked in Seattle. So I'll let him finish that story.
Yeah, so it was kind of one of those things. I love to do ghost tours in different cities because, partially to see what versions of the stories they're telling and to see who's kind of operating in that city and so forth. And I already was familiar with Ross from his work. I knew he had a long time in the field, and that was great. He gave a fantastic tour of haunted Seattle, and we were already friends online, and we just kept chatting after that. And just one of those things. I mean, sitting in my office one day, and I shot him a message, and I said, would you be interested in collaborating on a book? And he pretty much, shot right back, "Oh my God, I've been dying for you to ask this. I've been praying every night."
Oh, so it was the other way around. Ross was stalking you.
Yeah, the truth comes out, actually, right?
No, it was very organic. We just started talking about some different ideas, and the first one we came up with was haunted toys because no one had done it. And we threw some ideas back and forth about different haunted toys, and in really short order started writing the book and put it out. It was the first one in this series. And after that, we did a few conferences together and kept talking about different ideas and realizing that there are so many ghost stories out there, and Ross and I both have, a desire and a passion to get these down on paper and get them out before they're lost. And that's something he and I talk about a lot during the course of this series, because when we focus on a particular topic, we really have to dig in and find out, is the haunting, is the story real? Is this just an internet creation? What's the foundation of the tale? And how valid is it? And it's really tough sometimes. So we try our best to get to the core of these ghost stories and get them down as best we can in the different text. And it seems like they're almost getting more challenging with each one, because this last one we did was just sort of, it was tough. It was really tough to work on for a number of reasons, but we can get into that later. Anyway, we started putting the books out, and we started talking about different topics that nobody really had addressed, or at least not in a long time. And that's how it kind of evolved. So we did haunted ships and lighthouses, which has been done, but also, there's so much lore out there about haunted ships and so forth. So
it's endless. You guys could probably.
And one thing, and one thing I want to add too is the fact that ghost hunting has become so popular nowadays, and for us, being paranormal investigators, we have to rely on truth to base our investigations on and try to find answers to what's really happening in the paranormal world. And due to the popularity of ghost hunting, you have a lot of, I hate to say it, charlatans out there and people, craving their 15 minutes of fame. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people out there that have made up a lot of ghost stories and experiences.
Oh, yes.
And that really muddies up the field. And, and it makes it challenging for me and David to research a lot of these locations and narrow down to what is actually fact and what is actually fiction. Because again, for us to pursue the field of the paranormal, we need the true facts.
Oh, and you're not wrong. Television doesn't help either.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
I mean, I've been filming for like 18 years, and I always say it. I'm sure the world thinks I run around screaming demon, and out of every answer I give, you know, which could be 5 answers to one question, okay, it's a demon. I'm like, face palm. It's just
what the producers are. I know. It's what the producers are looking for.
But
when they ask you.
It's that bite. But I do know people who have made up stories to go on television. And you're right. You have to go into these locations and which story do you listen to? Where do you start? Because it's still a story, right?
And sometimes it's the location that promotes the phony story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And, you know, we won't call anybody out by name, but because, you know, as Ross said, because ghost hunting has become such a, you know, sort of a fad, and it's also this, you know, this popular activity, but it's also money making for a lot of people. And, you know, 10 years ago or more, when all these locations got onto the idea that, hey, we can tell these ghost stories and charge people, you know, X amount of dollars to come and investigate overnight. It's suddenly in their interest to promote the more dramatic ghost stories. And those are some of the most challenging ones sometimes. You know, sometimes, quite honestly, people have just forgotten what the real story is, what the real facts are.
Because they're not always as exciting.
Repeated so many times.
Yes.
Right.
Well, it's the fish that's this big and ends up being this big.
Oh, yes.
And you're just trying to reel it in. You end up with a
and so that's what me and David are trying to do. You know, we're trying to take it from this big back to here. We're trying to get to the root of a lot of this. And that's one thing I really enjoy working with David is we're fine with debunking a lot of these stories. And sometimes, you know, you can't always find the root to it. And you have to go with the legend of some of these, because some of these legends go way back to a point where you can't always find the research to support it or debunk it. But, you know, if we ever do come across the facts that say, hey, this really did not happen, we're okay with publishing saying this did not happen.
Yeah. We've done
That's great. You have integrity.
We've done that already.
Yeah. It's a matter of having integrity. With the haunted toys, did you both find that after Annabelle had hit cinemas, that all of a sudden everybody had a haunted doll or a haunted toy, a haunted truck, or, you know, anything from circa early 1900s all of a sudden had a spirit attachment? Did you find that a lot?
Well, I think a lot of people have definitely come forward with, you know, haunted objects. That has become a thing since there's been, you know, the Annabelle stories. So yes, there has been a lot more stories out there. But again, not really that are so involved that you have a good background story to validate some of these objects. You know, a lot of times you'll just come across some vague, you know, story saying, "Oh yes, I have a haunted doll." Well, you know, you need more for us to tell that story than just telling us you have a haunted doll.
Put your seatbelt on, because I was just approached by a producer about doing a show on haunted items, to which I have haunted items to which I declined doing. I was like, no, I'm good. I'm going to sit this one out. So it'll be a thing.
You know, it's interesting because we did the Haunted Toys book, but I also did a book myself that I think we've talked about on the show called Eerie Companions, that is very much a deep dive into haunted dolls specifically. And I went very in depth with the magical traditions that use dolls and the various superstitions and how entertainment has played a factor in the whole,
Chucky.
You know, haunted doll, right? Chucky and other different movies. And, you know, all the way back to the Twilight Zone and Talkie Tina and all these different things. And
I forgot about that.
Yeah, you know,
voodoo doll
Ross is saying.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
You know, there's so many more of these out there now, and a lot of times they just don't have any background. There's nothing to support the idea that they're haunted. Very often it's just someone says it's haunted, or it looks creepy to them, or they have a psychic impression. And, those are all well and good, but until there's more evidence that points to there being something attached to the object, we really don't have much to go on.
It's all about perception also,
it very much
what
is.
you think maybe you see or may or may not.
Well, I was going to say, too, it's kind of funny, too, because if you're ever looking for a haunted object, there's hundreds of them on eBay.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, it's always one person selling hundreds of haunted dolls,
Of course,
They sell holy water there, too, though,
Yeah. With a piece of toast with an image, it's like...
I was just like, okay, whatever.
Did you find
haunted
anything?
dolls?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I was say, did you find any credible, toys or... Because, they're all going to come out of the woodwork. I said, with this show coming, I just anticipate a barrage of things. So,
well, you have to remember there were tons of them that surfaced after Annabelle, but there were also tons and tons that surfaced when our buddy John Zaffis had his show, Haunted Collector.
Yes.
So, suddenly everyone had something that was haunted, whether it was a doll or an ink pen or, there's just all kinds of crazy things. And Ross and I, we both constantly get people contacting us with, I've got this haunted such and such, what do I do with it? Or, who will buy it? So, you really have to just tread carefully, but also understand that there are a lot of very old stories out there about haunted objects from before this became a fad and a popular thing. So with the book, we did a section on dolls, of course. We covered some other haunted toys from stories that Ross and I had collected over the years. And we also covered games, because there are a lot of very creepy games out there that, fall within this realm. Of course, everyone knows, the easy one, the Ouija board. But there's others too that are equally as or even more weird, I think.
Should we mention them? Or is that dangerous?
You wanted share with the class.
Want to open up that door?
Yeah. Well, one, I know Ross has a favorite. He likes to talk about the bath game, which is very creepy. But But before we turn that over to him, I'll talk briefly and tell you about Charlie, which was a huge fad. A few years ago now. And this involves balancing a pair of pencils, as you've probably seen the videos or remember the publicity for this, and forming a cross and putting yes and no in the outside. And you do this little ritual that summons Charlie, a demon. Michelle, a demon named Charlie.
Here we go again.
And,
absolutely,
you summon this demon, and of course, the parameters of this thing are just so bizarre, because you can ask Charlie questions, and he purportedly will answer by causing the pencils to move, in the direction of the answer. But there are tricks to it, because you can't just stop. You have to go through the proper ritual, or Charlie stays. And when you dig into this thing, it's such a weird combination of strictly an internet fabrication and a little bit of folklore thrown in, and just a real mishmash of different things that don't make any sense together. So when you read the background of this thing, you find out that Charlie is Mexican.
Yeah.
And he's a demon. So, we're saying, okay, so I'm going to talk to a Mexican demon named Charlie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not Jesus or Jose.
This all adds
Charlie.
up.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
wow.
The thing about this is it's a great example of how social media takes a hold of something like this and really sort of drives it, because what happened with this thing is it became a fad for kids to do, and the Catholic Church got wind of it. And of course, what happens when they hear that?
Now you're in trouble.
School kids are talking to a demon. That's all they need to hear. They don't look at the details. They're talking to a Mexican demon named Charlie that won't stop answering questions unless you tell him to. It's just bizarre.
It was all over YouTube.
It was
crazy.
It was all over everything.
A lot of
and
traumatic
the church
children.
actually helped the hype because they came out and made official statements, about how dangerous it was to toy with the demonic. And I'm thinking, oh my God, as soon as I saw this from the priest, I'm thinking, you just helped send this thing over the top, which is exactly what happened, because suddenly
it's exactly what happened.
Oh, the Catholic Church says you better not talk to this demon. What happens? Now more people believe, well, there must be something to it because the Catholic Church is worried about this demon coming through the pencils. So
on a table, on a piece of paper that you can easily shift.
That's right.
I did a whole show on that because that came out when Slender Man came out really big as well, because that young girl tried to kill her friend.
Right.
Yeah. That's hard.
So
mindset.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I actually interviewed Bishop James Long, who tried to lay it down so that people wouldn't, he investigated it, which I was grateful for, but it was a great 2 hours of radio. Not gonna lie.
Okay, I have to know about the bath game.
What is that?
The bathtub game.
You'll be sorry you asked.
Yes.
Are you in a bathtub, Ross?
Maybe.
You are. In fact, how this game works out is you are actually supposed to be alone in the house, and you will strip yourself naked, get in the bathtub. Well, you have to turn off all the lights too.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, great.
You're
Naked
completely naked in the dark in the bathtub.
The way I want it.
And there's this ritual, this summoning ritual that you'll go through. And as you're summoning this spirit of this woman, you're washing your hair, and you're envisioning this woman that has actually been killed because what had happened is she had died by slipping in the bathtub and piercing her eye socket with the faucet.
Oh.
And so you're supposed to envision this woman, all right? And as you're washing your hair, you're summoning her, envisioning her, and they'll say that you'll actually feel her rising up from behind you. You'll feel her wet, long hair along your back.
That's like the ring.
That's just a regular Wednesday. That's just a regular Wednesday. Come on.
So
that is creepy.
Once you've summoned her, all right, you're supposed to calmly, now that's the key word, calmly, get out of the bathtub in the dark and get out of the bathroom and shut the door behind you.
Oh, no.
All right, yeah.
That's not a game.
I see
that's
a lot of accidents happening,
That's Friday at Michelle's house, but yeah.
So, but that's not the game, though. The game starts the next day.
What?
So after you've summoned her, you go to bed. And when you wake up the next day, throughout the day, you're going to be playing red light, green light with the ghost. If you're familiar with that, whenever you turn around, who's ever behind you is supposed to stop and freeze before they touch you.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the kind of game that you play with the ghost throughout the day, because you want to keep her at a distance from her getting able to touch you throughout the day. And if you're successful, by the end of the day, once you get home, you can make this chopping motion, which basically ends the game and tells the spirit to move on.
Just by doing this.
And the spirit's going to be like, I don't think so.
The next time we clear house, we're going in there like this.
Yeah. No.
Wow.
I like it here.
So where did that start, the bathtub game?
It's actually, funny enough, it's actually from the Asian culture. It's an old game that they actually would play. In fact, there was another game called Hide and Seek Alone, which is another thing that they created where you play alone in the house in the dark with a doll. Yeah, and that one's even
doll
creepier.
again.
I have a few of those. That would be a lot of fun. That would be a lot of fun here with the 3 I have.
I tell you, it makes me wonder, these Asian, children, the Asian culture alone is so bound into, ghosts and the folklores and stuff like that. So these children definitely come up with these very interesting games to entertain themselves.
Wow.
Their stories are a lot of fun. They're mystics, and I'm so intrigued by them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I still can't get past just being naked and alone in the house in the dark, and then you got to outrun the ghost, lock her in your bathroom, and then see what happens.
You know what
know.
worries me with that is kids actually summoning something
yeah.
through that, because the intention is to summon something. And what happens if they're opening a portal or opening a door to something else?
Right.
Sure, and you're going to have a whole bunch doing it tonight after this show.
And it's funny, too, because I remember when we were working on that book and, I was talking to David, is, you have the actual recipe of what you're supposed to be doing to proceed with this game. And I was very hesitant to publish that information. And I remember talking to David. It's just like, do we give everybody the tools to proceed with something like this, proceed with caution. And that's basically what we agreed on, is just like, if we are truly researchers and publishers of these stories, we have to, put out the facts. And, and it's just one of those things that you hope that people are cautious, proceed with caution before, doing these on your own. Because, just like he was saying, with Charlie and Ouija boards, it's really not about the tools that you use. It's all about your intent.
It's all intention.
It's scary.
Well, and ultimately with any of these things, as Ross and I talked about prior to publishing it, what a 30-second search on the internet, gives you the instructions. Some variation, and there are variations of it, but there's so many things like this that people can easily find. So we try to put the information out and put the full information out and say, look, this is this is how this goes, but it's not really it's not a good idea.
We do not recommend this.
Happen. These are the stories. Take it for what you will. And with the Charlie thing, I really tried to drive the point home that this is, look, let's be real. This is something that has been fabricated. Somebody made this idea up. And the danger in it, as Ross was saying, is that, if you just fling the door open and invite whatever in, then you don't know what's coming in. But, this is important to realize that you need to understand the foundation of what you're researching or what you're looking at, and this nonsense of throwing in a so-called Mexican demon and naming Charlie and putting all these other elements into something, is just creating a recipe for either complete nonsense or disaster.
Well, I'm so glad you guys wrote this book and came together, because at least, there's parents out there that are concerned. They know that you've gone through the extent of researching and explaining it all, because I don't believe they would get the correct information online. When they see two experts writing this book, it's a little bit more soothing as a mom to know, and comforting that I'm getting great advice here that I need to know. And I think that book is a long time coming. It needed to be written a long time ago, because these games are just getting worse. And behind every urban myth lies some truth. Right? So
that's true.
The best we can do is just hope that people are intelligent enough and responsible enough that if given the proper tools, that they will make the right decisions.
I think you have high hopes in some cases.
True.
And I mean, I'm just putting it out there because I know some of the emails that I get, and I'm thinking, what?
What did
this
you
was a good
do?
idea. I know.
Yeah. It's for the thrill, though, right? They do it for the thrill. And when you have teens involved, good Lord, that's a lot of.
I think you also end up with a lot of sofa investigators, couch investigators, who's like, it's like shouting at the TV, no, go in there, do it like this. And, these are the same people who, and again, it's not like it used to be when I got started, and I'm sure you guys got started, where you built a website, you built your reputation, now with social media, it's just a page. And it's not like there's any real training to it, you just have to have a lot of common sense. And again, remember, a lot of it is about perception, and a lot of it is, not everything's a demon. Sorry, people. But, I always say one of my favorite words is psychokinesis, because I see it so much.
Oh, wow.
But because of television, I think people find it easier to think that there is something really malevolent in the home, as opposed to thinking that, hey, wow, got something going on here, a pretty powerful individual to be able to project out this kind of energy. And, at least it's easier to get help for something like that in some cases. But, I think if you stick together, you both, you research, because I've worked with people, honestly, we're in the same location and you end up, on a radio interview and two entirely different stories. I'm like, was I at the right place?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That 500 pound demon coming. How did I miss it?
They were in the demon room. They were in the
not
demon
the green room,
and you
not
were
in the green room,
the non-active room.
I must have been, because when I heard the interview, I'm like, how was I? I'm pretty sure I was there the whole time. Yeah. I was like, I must have just had a time slip or got abducted or something. Because how do you miss something that was 500 pounds running at you down a narrow little hallway and you're standing there?
500 pounds, plus they have a weight for it.
I don't know how to read it. I don't know.
But you know what it is, though, from my perception. I mean, I've been doing this stuff since the 1970s, and the truth is that people getting into the field now, they don't really have to work for it, because they can go online and within a few moments, they've read 24 ghost stories, and reports of demons and hauntings and all these different things, and they're not really doing the research. They're not going to the locations. And when they do go to the locations, I find that a lot of people go there with a very preconceived idea. Oh, we know that there's a demon on the 3rd floor of this building. We know there's a portal on the 5th floor, where they're all dropping down from. You hear all of this stuff. And, Ross and I have been on locations. I don't know if I should talk about this too much or not, but we did a location a few years ago.
We're going down the rabbit hole here.
I know we are. We did a location.
Okay, you're amongst
Don't worry,
friends.
I've got the
million of us. That's all.
We did a location a few years ago. I won't go into too many details, but really cool place, very very active. Actually, some great stories attached to it. But one of the people there, they started telling us they had all this information, and they started giving it to us, and we were both standing there, and we were pretty fascinated by, wow, so you verified all this. And we asked this 2 or 3 times, and finally, when it got around to it, and we finally asked, well, some detail came out that was a bit much, and I said, how did you verify this? And the answer we got was that they used something that we'll just say is very dubious. I better leave it at that, because I'll give away too many details. But the thing is that Ross and I both had a pretty amazing experience at the location, because it is very active. So my point to all of this is that very often they're not doing themselves or the location justice, because they're elaborating on something because they want a story so bad, rather than letting the information come naturally, rather than letting investigators really get in and dig in and find out what's going on there and see what kind of evidence they can collect.
But it's contaminated information is how I look at it. I want to go in somewhere raw. I don't want to know about it, really.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no,
absolutely. And this is the biggest problem we have in this field, is because the popularity of ghost hunting, a lot of these property owners are given false information by who they believe or were told were a psychic. They had a psychic come in. No idea how credible this person is, but the psychic told them, oh, yes, you have a little boy. His name's Billy, and, he haunts this little area. He wants toys. And, of course, the owner is going to take that to heart and start bringing toys in. But we have no idea how credible this psychic was. And I've been in plenty of properties. I got to do the Ancient Rams Inn back in the day.
Great place.
That was an amazing place. And, I met the elderly gentleman that ran it before he passed away. And, and he was telling me all these amazing stories. And I was just like, oh, wow, this is so amazing. There's supposedly, children that were sacrificed, buried in this corner, and there's, a woman was hung over here and she haunts this area. And of course, there's a succubus, raping me every other night. And there was all these, stories that he had. And of course, for me as an investigator, I want to know, like, David said, well, what is your source? Where'd you get this? And it all just came from, psychics or other paranormal investigators that came in and just gave him these elaborate stories. And so, as a paranormal investigator, I've always said, you got to go with what you know and not with what you think you know. And so you have to strip things down to the root. What is...
Okay, I'm
sorry.
Like,
it's okay. It's not me. She's like, what's in my house?
Things always happens in my house, but that doesn't sound like one of mine.
Michelle lives in a haunted house, so we're very,
not one of mine.
We're a little sketchy when there's a noise that we're not recognizing normally.
So did you have an experience at, I hate that, but did you have an experience at the Ancient Merman?
Oh yeah, I had an
all
amazing
of that
experience.
Okay.
But the thing is, what I'm getting at is, and like David was saying, is we've got far too many people giving us misleading information rather than the true leading information that we need. It just all goes back to what we talked about in the very beginning. There's just too many fake stories out there, and it's frustrating because these owners of these properties believe this stuff. And
it's too many hands in the pot.
So bad, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are situations where they terrify their clients to death, where the point where they're like, I got to move out. Yeah. And they may financially not be able to move out.
Yeah, that's difficult.
I think real estate agents play a role in that too, though. If they know someone's into it, they're going to play on the fact that it's haunted and this and that. Like, it's a sales pitch. It's really sad. David, I wonder if you and I... Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, thank you. I wonder if you and I were at the same place. I won't mention where this location was, but I had a similar experience. I went in to tour a very famous haunted location on holiday, and I just went in just normal, not an investigation, as a tour. And I was trying to actually book this person on a radio show. So I told him who I was. And then he's like, oh, feel free to go ahead and do your own thing, like as a medium, go in there. And other people had heard, so they wanted obviously to come with me to see what I was picking up. But my story, my experience did not match their story. So he came up to me and pulled me aside in the kitchen and said, Amelia, you have to stop talking out loud. I don't mind if you go ahead, but I have a script to follow. He actually said, I have a script to follow.
Wow, there you go. See?
For his tour.
I
don't think he realized what he was saying to me. And I just looked at him and I go, but that's not how it happened. I'm like,
wow. And, sometimes these stories, they're told one time initially from someone who they may be good intention. They may believe they have the right information, but actually, I'll give you a perfect example, the Queen Mary. Queen Mary, there's a story of the ghost of a little girl in the pool area. And this story came from a psychic who used to work at Queen Mary, Peter James, a great guy. I knew him years ago.
Yeah, he was.
And, he's the one who came up with this information. But the problem is that everyone took this as gospel, right? So ever since then, people talk constantly about the little girl who died in the pool area. But, as an investigator and a researcher, you have to dig into that information and find out what evidence is there to support this. What is there beyond the psychic information that came from one person initially? There are no records of a little girl dying there.
There we go.
And, so now what happens when that gets uncovered, people who, of course, are invested in this because they've gotten evidence of this little girl and they know that she's there. They felt, it was a conspiracy because that was the upper class hid the fact that a little girl had died there. And, is it possible?
Wow.
Sure, absolutely. But, the more we stretch these things out, the less likely it's really true. So we have to back up and question, all right, there does appear to be some kind of activity in the pool area, but what is it and why is it there?
And back then, it would have been all over the papers, especially, when you're talking about upper class and middle class.
Yeah, but they probably could have hidden it if that's the case. But
it would have leaked as the upper class saying that it's not fact, because they had a ton of rags then. It's like the internet.
Conspiracy, though. You have to.
No.
And the fact that,
the whole thing is you had a huge paranormal show that covered that story. That's why it went. That's why it went where it went.
Yeah.
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 And in that situation, the crew would have had to had a report made of this, unfortunate little girl dying.
Yeah.
There would have had to have been some sort of report, because how are you going to explain, escorting the body of this little girl off the boat?
It's illegal to hide that. Yeah, but it's illegal to hide a death. There would be a coroner's report that's public. You would have to look at it as a crime. You would be able to find things, in public records. And you didn't, right?
Again, the Queen Mary is very haunted. It genuinely is. There's a lot of, so many people have had experiences there. I know I've investigated it a few times. Ross has. And, it genuinely is a haunted ship. Mm-hmm. But we do a discredit to the location by focusing so much on a story that is likely not at all accurate, at least partially not accurate.
I have a life jacket that comes from the Queen Mary. It is not haunted, just saying.
I wish I could have done that.
It's very cool.
Queen Mary is amazing. I would have loved to have been able to do that. Yeah.
Considering it came from such a haunted place, it's just like, hello, nothing in there. Okay. So let's talk about lighthouses for a moment, because the theories on lighthouses, they say when you're, close to large bodies of water, that there'll be more energy, things will be amped up. Is this the case with the lighthouses? Like, why are there so many of them? And people are just so into it, lighthouses. What is it about
for me, it's the symbolism. A lighthouse is a guiding light to safety. Mm-hmm. It's symbolism in the church, religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, anybody who was on a ship back in those days, their reliance, when they're facing the fogs or the storms, to find safety. And so that light is your guiding light,
mm-hmm. That would make sense. Do you think spirits would be drawn to it?
Yeah, I definitely. I think, when you're lost, you're a lost soul. I think definitely you're guided to that. But you also have to understand what it took to run a lighthouse. Mm-hmm. You would think for some people it would be a life of imprisonment, because most of these lighthouse keepers were isolated on these little islands and mm-hmm. had to do this routine day after day after day to make sure that lighthouse was lit. Mm-hmm. For most of us, that would be prison, mm-hmm. But that was their life. They chose to be there. And they had this routine that they had to do day after day to make sure that light was always lit. And I think those combinations right there really draw into the perfect recipe for a haunting. Mm-hmm. Because
tremendous responsibility.
Exactly. Yeah. You got to make sure you're there. You're driven to make sure you're doing your duty.
So, and you still would into the afterlife also.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. Because, and at the very least, I think you're looking at the perfect recipe for residual haunting, because these are people in many cases who spent their entire lives, adult lives, doing this job. As Ross is saying, they had a routine. They had to stick to that routine. Sometimes they would have to, every so many hours, they would have to fill the oil or keep the engines running, keep that light running. And you can just imagine it took a certain type of mental strength to be able to do that job, because of the severe isolation and often the starkness of the location, combined with the incredible solitude. In some cases, these people had families, but often, they would be there themselves or with maybe an assistant. And, sometimes in many cases, these people, the lighthouse keeper and the assistant, wouldn't know each other until they were both assigned to the location. Can you imagine that? oh, you're being sent to serve this post for X number of years in this solitary location. And by the way, there's this other guy coming.
And every day they had to search the shores because often bodies would wash up there. So they would have to, and they would have a separate, sometimes it was outside of the lighthouse. Sometimes it was inside like a cellar where they would keep these bodies until someone came and relieved them. So they would have to pick up. They were seeing death a lot. That's tremendous.
Well, and there are other factors too,
imagine the pressure.
Sometimes there are other things that come in with these locations intersecting with history, so to speak. A perfect example of that is Point Lookout in Maryland, which is a lighthouse built in the 1830s. But what happened was the Civil War rolled around, and suddenly the Union needed somewhere to keep Confederate prisoners. So they fenced off this area. It was 20 acres.
Wow.
And they designed it to hold 10,000 prisoners, if you can imagine that, in 20 acres.
Wow.
By the end of the war, there were 20,000 prisoners kept on these grounds, 20 acres, near starvation, just, desperate to get out. And as a result, now that area, there are countless people who have seen the ghost of Confederate soldiers in the region. They've seen them running across the road that's outside of the lighthouse. They've seen them on the grounds and lots of other experiences. But it's layer upon layer of history at this location, and so many different spirits seem to have intersected there. There's the spirit of one of the former lighthouse keepers, who actually was a woman, kind of rare for the time, but she was the daughter of the first lighthouse keeper. And when he passed away, she took over. So she really did spend almost her entire life in this lighthouse. And when she passed away, she seems to have continued her job because people have believed they've encountered her at the location. And beyond that, there was a family cemetery on the grounds of this lighthouse property. And at one point, I believe it was the 1970s, if I'm recalling correctly, there was an official who was out doing some work on the grounds, and he saw a woman who appeared to be kind of lost and as if she was searching for something. He realized there was something off about what was going on here. And the short version of the story is that he determined that she was a ghost. And historians kind of put the pieces together and found out that this young woman, whose last name was Taylor, had been buried on the property, but the headstone to her grave marker had disappeared. And it's believed that her spirit was wandering the grounds looking for that marker. Now, very disturbing. The headstone did turn up. It was in a local hotel.
Oh,
someone had stolen it as a prank or something, or as a, who knows. And somehow it ended up at this hotel. But, this is a great example of, you've got all the elements of lighthouses that we're talking about. And then these other factors that come in, the Civil War and the things it brought to the area, and, the experience of some of the locals who were there. So very haunted location, very cool place.
Wow. Yeah. It's definitely always something that's been fascinated. People are very drawn to lighthouses. And I like the idea, that it is that light in the darkness for so many lost souls that are coming in. But I also like the fact that people are still working, because there was so much responsibility put on their shoulders, to keep that light on. It's very difficult, especially depending on how you die. If you go with the theory that, you die unexpectedly, sometimes you just don't even know you passed on, and you just keep going through the motions,
Well, I was going to say,
sad.
Similar to that, one of the lighthouses that I wrote about in the book, Sequin Lighthouse, this is the lighthouse that was constructed in 1857, if I remember correctly, actually by George Washington himself.
Oh, wow.
He had commissioned this lighthouse. And some of these lighthouses have multiple ghost stories to them. I think the most famous, it has a legend to it, where a young couple had just been married. And they, of course, he's a lighthouse keeper, so he's, packing up his wife, his new bride, to go start this new life on this little island, to maintain this lighthouse. But to entertain her, he decides to buy her a piano. And so, this is going to be great because long winters on this little island, she's going to need something, to pass the time. So he has this beautiful piano hauled off to the island. It's hoisted up, the cliffs, put into the lighthouse, and they settle in. Everything starts out really romantic, all great, but then winter settles in, and so now she's got a lot of time on her hands, and so she decides, well, I'm going to learn how to play this piano. Well, little did they know that the piano only came with one sheet of music. So,
wow.
but this young bride, to please her husband, she decides that she's gonna perfect this one song. So that means that she's playing this tune over and over and
I was gonna
over.
say.
I think you know where this is going,
Yeah.
For this poor lighthouse keeper to hear this melody over and over again, it drove him mad. And so one day he just had enough, and he grabbed an axe and he went charging for that piano. He was going to destroy that piano. But his wife threw herself in front of the piano.
Oh.
And in his fit of rage, he tore through her and that piano.
Oh.
And realizing what he had done, he basically climbed the lighthouse tower and jumped.
Wow.
And since that, people have said that they've heard, if you're passing by the lighthouse on a calm day, or even in a calm night, you can actually hear piano music coming from the lighthouse.
Oh, that's creepy.
So then you fall into, is it a ghostly thing or is it a residual thing?
Well, it could be residual,
it had been
but
imprinted,
engraved.
But to be honest, we can't validate if that story actually had happened. But the root to this story is the fact that people do hear that piano music.
Oh, it's fascinating.
But to get into the fact that you were talking about, where people, this is their life, that lighthouse also has another story to it. And this goes back to 1985. After they had retired a lot of the lighthouses and made them automated, so you no longer needed keepers to maintain these lighthouses, they had sent the Coast Guard out to vacate the lighthouse. So they wanted to pull all the furniture, all the reports, everything that was valuable out of these lighthouses and seal them up. And so, of course, these two Coast Guard members, that was their job. They arrived one day to start packing things up. Now, they knew this was going to be an overnight job because, they weren't able to leave early enough. So they decided to spend the night. Well, that night, one of the young men was awoken by his bed frantically shaking. And he looks up, and his focus is drawn to this dark shadow of a figure of a man standing at the foot of his bed. And the man is just shaking his head, and he says, "Please don't take my furniture. Please just leave my home alone." And he just faded away.
Wow. So
that guy, So that guy was terrified, goes into the other room and spends the night with his partner,
Sure. But we're leaving everything.
but the fact of the matter is they continued to do their job. They packed up everything, loaded up into a small, boat, and they were getting ready to lower it into the water, and the chain broke, causing the boat and all the possessions of the lighthouse crashing into the water and sinking.
Wow.
They couldn't explain how that happened. But I believe that keeper that haunts that location did not want to part with his personal objects.
Mm-hmm.
So he did whatever he could to keep them there.
You must be like so much fun at a campfire, seriously.
I know. Life is a party. Just throw a few drinks in them. All right, let's go.
I'm a medium and I'm like, what?
I know. Wow. Yeah. Lighthouses and ships. How did you guys how do you narrow down like haunted ships, especially when you're dealing with ghost ships, because I know just the Great Lakes alone are loaded with stories, of ghost ships appearing and reappearing and disappearing. And then you're getting into the ocean, like Bermuda Triangle or the different triangles of the world. How did you narrow it down, aside from the Flying Dutchman, which everybody wants to know about?
Well, yeah. So in terms of the series, when we pick any given topic, if it's something that is a very rich area like ships and lighthouses, obviously we could have done a singular book on either one of those. And one of the reasons we chose to combine the two was that it has been done a lot, but we wanted to take a little bit of a different twist. And we decided right at the beginning, there's certain ones you almost have to cover. You have to talk about the Dutchman. You have to talk about the Queen Mary. There and with any given topic, there are some that we're like, okay, we can't leave this out. We just did haunted prisons. We have to cover Eastern State and Alcatraz. Yeah. But the goal was to, with each one, to cover some of the well-known ones and try to get to the root of the stories, get the facts out there, but also to cover ones that are not so well known, that don't get very much attention. And eventually, we've talked about this, eventually some of these topics we could certainly come around and do a second volume easily, but we just sort of try to generate a list and narrow it down from there and see which ones have really good stories and accounts that we can dig into and tell. And sometimes it's dictated by locations we've investigated. In some cases, there's been a lot of these. Ross and I are both like, I've investigated that one, so have I. So
we're fighting like, who's going to do the story?
Right. Yeah, who's going to do the story? So, and sometimes we both work on it. We did that with Alcatraz, but yeah, we just try to give a good mixture of the ones that everyone wants to hear about, even though they've heard about them before, and some of the lesser known locations. And so far, we've had a fairly easy time doing that. We covered haunted churches, which was very easy, actually, because no one has written about haunted churches, and there are a surprising number of them out there. So we actually had to narrow that down and decide, all right, well, which ones of these do we cover and leave out? And so far, everything has been U.S. based. We haven't done any. I was
just going to say, it's been helpful that we keep it all within the U.S.
Yeah.
It is, and also too, like we've talked about earlier. If we have the opportunity to put a rest to some of these stories, we want to take that opportunity.
Have you been able to do that, or are you still up in the air with so much?
There's quite a few stories that we put an end to and said this did not happen, and I think that's important to get out there too, especially with a lot of these places that are so famously haunted. When you got hundreds of people visiting these places for its ghosts. I want to at least be able to say that, I at least got the true stories out there. Yes, this place is haunted. No, it's not so-and-so, but yes, it could be this person. And I think that is, doing us justice as well, is to at least, put an end to some of the bad or fake stories out there.
The other thing too is that, we really strive to, we go to news sources, we'll go to interviews, we'll talk to people whenever it's possible. If we've been to the location, either one of us, then we've got that as a resource. But we're trying to focus more on the history and the stories rather than, we're not writing books saying this is what happened on our investigation of this location. Right. We'll put a little bit of that in, especially if it supports some of what we're writing about in the story. But it's very much a series that it's not focusing on this is what the investigation revealed. We're saying, no, this is what history says. This is what witnesses say. We kind of want this series to be something that if you're going to go investigate a haunted prison, you probably want to read, Weatherly and Allison's book before you do. If it's covered in there, you'll know what the facts are.
And I want to add a little bit to it, because I know David kind of lightly brushed on it in the beginning, is what I feel is so important about these books is, again, getting something published, it's forever. And the problem is ghost hunting is so popular, but you find a lot of these groups pop up and disappear within 3 years. They say the average life expectancy of a ghost hunting group is about 3 years because they get bored with it or other things come up with their lives. But a lot of times these groups get into some amazing places and do have amazing experiences. And what happens to the evidence once the group dissipates? The website's no longer there. The stories are no longer there. Their experiences are no longer there. And so it's just lost forever. And so that's why I feel it's so important for what me and David are doing is we are trying to make sure that those stories are forever.
Like a journal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because those true stories are so important in our research.
And I find it overlooked because it's like what we were talking about earlier. People don't, the real stories are not always exciting as the made up stories.
No.
You know, I mean, I've had locations where researchers like, no, that place isn't haunted. But there's so many people that have had experiences. It's like, how do you discount all that despite what it is, like experiences that are happening? And I'm talking about like hundreds of people going through, you know, a certain
and a lot
location.
of that has to do with the owners, you know, the owners of the properties, whether their personal beliefs may be that they don't believe in ghosts and they poo-poo the whole idea that they bought a haunted location. But then there's also the fact that, and this again goes to the root of the fact that, you know, the popularity of ghost hunting, a lot of these businesses have bad experiences with other groups.
Oh,
it's to the point where I don't want another group here ever again.
Huge.
And
I've
that
been brought
ruins
into
it for us
locations
too.
for that. Yeah. You have to be, I always say you have to be really humbled when, whether it's a family who brings you in, you have to be humble because they're entrusting the most special thing in their life to you, which is their family, you know, and that's a really, I take that responsibility very, very seriously. You know, and there's a lot of groups that do it the other way around. You should be lucky I'm here to help you. No, it's not like that at all. It has to be the other way around. And I've had locations, you know, request me to come in. I did a very prestigious location because they were, I guess, you know, like, let's just say a society, so to speak. And they're like, look, a lot of people have experiences here. They've been having them for like 70 years. Everybody and his brother wants to get in here. We'd like you to do it and represent us, you know, paranormally speaking. I'm like, well, I'll do my best. But, you know, there's really nothing definitive about the paranormal or trying to, what is proof exactly? And they were also a charitable organization. So I said, you know, I did tours and events to bring people in to see who would get experiences, and it generated money for the location. And, you know, and it was great. People had tons and tons of experiences. I says, beyond that, and, you know, getting like voice recordings and maybe the occasional photograph, but we left it to the people who went in there completely green and just like, you know, not that some researchers didn't come along because they couldn't get into the location otherwise, but it was seeing people come in with their families trying to have an experience because it was a controlled environment. It was a safe environment. And that's where the best stories came from. Were just people who were not researchers, who were just there as tourists.
Right.
You know, because no stories were given aside from the history of the location. That's it. So I don't know, you know, but I do agree with you. There are a lot of, you know, fly-by-nights or a lot of experts. I love that word. It's a media word. This is our
I would say there's no experts, but there is experience.
Yes.
You know.
Correct.
That's well said. Well said.
Correct.
Both of you touched on Alcatraz, which is another bucket list location for me. Did you find going in there that you were experiencing similar experiences that others have shown or written about, or, you know, on television kind of thing?
Well,
or did you have new experiences with that?
I'd have to say I was pretty lucky because I, you know, got into this before, you know, the ghost hunting shows, you know, along with David as well. So when I got to do Alcatraz, I was one of the first groups to actually spend the night on Alcatraz.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is again before, you know, the ghost hunter shows were on there. And I have to say it was really amazing because we got to see places that were not open to the public. If you've ever gone to Alcatraz, you get on your self-guided tour. So there's places that you get to go on, walk around on the tour, but they opened up spots that had never had the public go through. I got to walk through the tunnels where they actually drop the prisoners off, and they walk them through the tunnels into the prison. They don't get dropped off on the shore like the public does, when they do the tour. And so I got to walk through those tunnels under the island. And that was one of my, an interesting experience there is me and an investigation partner, we were alone in those tunnels, and we actually heard like somebody walking with us or behind us. And I remember the first time we heard it was like one of those moments like, stop, hush, everybody. And you'd listen and you'd hear those 2 extra steps and then it would stop. And I thought, at first it was just one of the other, rangers, because the rangers were spending the night with us, guiding us through the overnight investigation. And I just thought maybe it was one of the rangers, looking out for us, wondering where we wandered off to, or, just to keep an eye on us to make sure we're safe. Because again, we're in an area that's not open to the public. So we would just stand there and we were just waiting, for somebody to approach us, just to say, hey guys, just want to make sure you're okay. Nobody. So again, we start, moving a little closer, and again, you'd hear the footsteps behind you. And, we freeze and like, okay, I heard that, you heard that. And then all of a sudden it continued. And it got to the point where we almost felt like there was this pressure forming on us. Like something that had approached us and was just lingering over us. You couldn't see anything. I got my flashlight, flashing everywhere just to see if I can see something, some sort of sign that there's something there. But it was nothing. It was just this overwhelming force that you could feel, overpowering you. And it lasted for a good, couple minutes. But, for us, it felt like it was a lot longer than that. And then suddenly it just faded away. And as it started to fade away, you could almost hear those footsteps walking away from you.
Wow, that's a crazy experience.
Yeah, but my actual first physical experience was actually at Alcatraz as well that night. They had taken us to the morgue where they actually keep the bodies of the prisoners before they ship them over to the city. And I was the first to enter the morgue area and, checking out. It's kind of cool. We go down there's this tunnel that goes down underground. And I'm the first to walk down this tunnel and explore. I'm a little adventurous. I have been known to get ahead of people and start walking around, checking things out. And so I decided I was going to go down this tunnel. My team was not too far behind me, so I wasn't completely alone. And I wanted to see what this was, where this tunnel had led to. Well, the tunnel led to an underground room. Now, the history of the prison is it actually started out as a military fort. And so where I'm actually going is when it was a fort, this is where they used to keep the gunpowder because they had to keep it cool. So I'm going down into this tiny little room, dirt floor, brick walls and an arched brick ceiling, nothing unusual. And I'm taking pictures, but I want to get a picture of the entrance. Now, at this time, my members are starting to filter into the room as well. But I want to get the widest angle of that entrance. So I'm backing up and I'm looking through my view screen. And this is when we were using film back in the day. So you had to use that view screen. Mm-hmm. So I'm going through the view screen, slowly backing up, trying to get that wide angle. And one of the members puts their hand on my shoulder and stops me. And so, I look away, to apologize to the member that I had backed into the corner, and there was nobody there. There was nobody around me.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was expecting to see one of my members standing next to me, but there was nobody there. I felt the pressure of fingers on my shoulders, the weight of a man's hand. And again, it physically stopped me as I was taking a step backwards. Mm-hmm. Nobody there.
There's nothing like the feeling of being touched, especially for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
I remember it
that
happening
didn't sound
to...
right. That didn't sound right.
I thought about it when I said it, and I'm like, I have to bow out very gracefully with this. So
yeah, we're all G-rated minds here, okay?
I know.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay.
Suddenly the show takes a turn.
Be graceful.
It's just watching us and then hearing us on a stream are two different things. So they can't see your face. Yeah.
It happened to one of my team members, one of our younger team members at one point, and he had been just touched on the shoulder, and his face kind of just did this thing, and I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, and I'm like, and he goes, something touched me. I went, okay, is that all right? I'm fine. That was the end of it. I'm fine. And it was just like, all right, do you need some time? Like, it just felt a little personal. So I think people react differently. I would have been like, oh, do it again. That's phenomenal, and other people are just, you can see it's completely outside their comfort zone, completely. So you seem to have taken it, were you anxious, like, do it again? Or were you like, okay, see, right there, that's boundaries.
And that's the funny thing is, people are like, oh my God, you got to be so brave to be a ghost hunter. And as I always tell people, most of the time it's very tame doing a ghost hunt. You don't always experience something paranormal.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you do experience something, it's so fast and sudden, you're not even sure what you just experienced. You're questioning yourself. So that was a prime example of that. I had expected to see a living person next to me, so for me, I was just baffled, like, what just happened? So you just start reliving that situation over and over in your head, trying to explain what you just experienced, and then you just have to realize that was a ghost, That's
pretty cool because you didn't feel threatened. You were just a little startled.
Well, considering where you were.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even say startled, at the time. I was just looking to apologize to somebody back in the corner. I was more startled at the fact that, wow,
there was
there's
no one there.
here.
Sorry, I would have been I startle easy. I'm not the person to go on an investigation. I can tell you that. I startle so easy. I'm not afraid of anything, but I'll jump at the stupidest things. So
yeah, most of the time. Hey, I David has proof of this. There's a video of me screaming. Okay, so I'll admit to it.
At least
what's interesting about Alcatraz, though, is that I find that it's one of these places. It has such a rich history, and again, so many different layers of history and historical events and hauntings, because the island itself was used by the Native Americans in the region as a place of banishment. And they would send people there who broke taboos of the tribe. They would banish them to this island and just leave them. So, again, it's one of these places that who knows how many people actually perished on the island, even before it was a prison. But once it became it was a military prison first. After it was a fort, it was a military prison. And, the records are just very sketchy back in the early periods of imprisonment on the island. So we honestly don't know how many people died there. But then all the way up, of course, during the most famous period when it was Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. But what's interesting to me is that despite how famous it is and how many legends and ghost stories are attached to it, it seems to be one of these locations that is the least exaggerated in a sense. You don't hear constant tales that, this entity and that entity and all this. You kind of get two sets of things. You get a set of stories that are almost a bit folkloric and legendary. There's a story about a party in the warden's house, and a couple of guards were in attendance and witnessed a gentleman in essentially Victorian clothing come walking in, with a bushy, sideburns and dressed very dapper. And when he entered the room, it went deathly cold, and the Franklin stove that was heating the place suddenly went out. And just as quickly as he appeared, he vanished. This is a really cool story, but you can't find a lot of information about it. So it's one of these that it's a great ghost legend, and it's certainly it's covered in the book, and it's something that is attached to Alcatraz, but we just don't know. And there's kind of this gap between those types of stories, which there are a handful of those, And then modern accounts from, gosh, prisoners, former prisoners, former guards, tourists, just a whole range of people who have had experiences there. And it kind of goes on and on. Alcatraz, I've been to Alcatraz a few times. And the first time I went there, I started talking to one of the rangers. And the whole island is part of the National Park Service in the United States. So it's managed by park rangers. And you never know what you're going to get with park rangers, you know. So the first gentleman, I started talking to him about Alcatraz, and I asked him about the hauntings, and he said, "Oh no, that's all, well, BS is what I'll say." You know, he said, "No, it's not haunted. I've been working here for X number of years, and it's not haunted." And I just kept talking to him, you know, and he was asking me who I was, and I told him, I said, "I've written some books," and so the more I talked to this guy, he suddenly starts opening up and says, "Well, I've seen one or two things here, but I really don't think Alcatraz is haunted. However, I used to be a police officer in San Francisco, right across the bay." And I talked to this guy for a long time. He's telling me about all these haunted locations in San Francisco that nobody knows about.
Wow.
However,
that's how you find out.
Yeah, that's how you find out. So, well, that's old school. You go and talk to people. I mean, that's how I started in the field. But, on other visits, I would talk to other rangers and, of course, ask them the question, and they get this look, and they're like, "Oh yes, it's haunted." I was there one night with correction. It was not unusual for them to have different types of torture devices, essentially, to try to keep control of the prisoners, and that leaves a tremendous amount of energy, traumatic energy, on these locations. Many of them built of limestone or granite and things like this that are heavyweight. And of course, we know about limestone, but
there's a psychological imprint to a lot of these places.
There is, and many of them just with nicknames that don't necessarily make any sense, but just imply something. The Missouri Pen is nicknamed the 47 bloodiest acres in America, and nobody knows exactly where that came. It's not on 47 acres, but terrible riots and other things that happen there. And you delve into this history, and yes, sometimes you really have to go down the rabbit hole. I'm not a fan of true crime stuff, but it was kind of by necessity to delve into some of that with this book, because you have to get to the root of what's caused the haunting, and what the nature of these people are who were there. So it was challenging. A friend of mine today said it must have been a tremendous weight to write that book, and I was like, yeah, you're right. It really was. Going through this material and understanding these stories. But again, I think Ross and I both feel this way. It's important to get these stories out there, even in cases like this, and help people understand. And it's a different kind of effect that has caused these hauntings. In many cases, very disturbing things.
Mm-hmm. Have you got any flack for it, like from your peers? Like when you say do you call it debunking or just putting out accurate information? Because not everybody takes the time to really look into it, and sometimes you get some groups who just swear by, "This is our location. We know this is this," or "We've investigated. We say it's good," and you guys come in and go, "No, we don't think so." Have you gotten any sort of negative feedback from your peers, really?
I think in most cases, the praises have been higher than any type of negative feedback.
Which is great.
I think people are grateful to have a resource to look into and have an accurate account of what happened in a lot of these places.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we've stated, we're not afraid to say this story is BS.
Right.
And it just goes to show if an investigator is so involved in a false story, then it just goes to show what kind of investigator they are. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of these stories are quite easily debunkable just with a little bit of research.
And I should emphasize, if we're calling something like that out, we're doing so with the facts to back it up. And it hasn't, I know this, we've come around to this a couple times tonight, but it hasn't been that often. However, on the occasions that it has come up, we do make an effort to say, well, this is what the real story is, which often is more interesting than the fabricated story. But, I don't worry about anybody complaining about that, because as Ross says, if they are, then it's reflecting what kind of investigator they are. And if they're arguing with us, I'm simply going to point to the book and say, well, this is our source. This was what the newspaper said at the time. Here's the exact, there was one in the Haunted Prisons book that we just did that Ross had to really chase around, and I helped him find the original source that was published, the original report that was published in the newspaper of the time. And it said, this is what happened. This is what the coroner said. This is what the officials say. And, you often get into these things that it becomes more contrived. With that case, again, it was a whole conspiracy. Oh, well, yeah, that's what the officials claim, but there was a conspiracy and a cover up and all this. But there's no evidence of that, and there's no reason.
Right. The biggest thing is, what is the reason
that
for
would be
it?
the case.
Right.
It almost sounds like they just want it to be real because it's just a lot of fun for them rather than accurate. I personally am so proud of the two of you. I want to buy every book that you wrote now. Like, seriously, I'm just going, okay, wait. I got to go online because I have to get this. But I'm so proud that the two of you put that time in. It's what's lacking in this field, honestly.
Well, and to touch base a little bit more on that issue is, like, if somebody wants to argue that, yes, they believe that this happened, then where's your proof? We supplied proof to validate our debunking style of this story. What is your proof? Oh, it's the spirit box. Oh, it's a psychic. That's not proof. I'm sorry.
But is there any proof? It's easy, I guess, to historical information, for the most part, if you really dig as a good researcher, you'll find it. I love to research. I will dig and reference and cross-reference several times over just to see what keeps coming up, Right. And I mean, when you're looking at, well, what do you deem as proof when it's in a field of that it is an unexplainable thing? You can get EVPs. I like voice recordings because it's just, a little bit hard to debunk unless you get them, unless somebody really knows what they're doing and can really mess around with them once they hit the computer. I like photographs either on a Polaroid or film camera, and even my EVPs I like on old cassette tapes that just can't fudge them unless they go digital. I'm old fashioned like that.
The biggest problem is we can't use the paranormal to prove the paranormal.
Sadly.
And if you're truly trying to be a paranormal investigator and use a scientific style of investigating, you really have to go with the facts. And I know we could, throw, theories out there to tell, the day is done. But in all honesty, you have to go with the facts. And as I've said earlier, you really have to go with what you know and not with what you think you know. And so it's really one of those things that I think that makes me a unique investigator because, for me, I'm just going to be open and honest with you guys. I've been to some of the most scariest places around the world. And I could tell you some amazing ghost stories and make up, some amazing experiences just to get my name out there, but I'm not going to do it. I've worked too hard to build my credibility in this field, and it can be ruined, with just all one bad story or one bad claim.
And I agree because I've done the same thing, and unfortunately, media will throw a hand in there.
Media is not always your best friend.
No, most definitely not, But I mean, I'm much like yourself. I'm a world traveler. I've been to some amazing locations, and I've spoken about some of my personal experiences, to which, there were team members or just other people, there also. And some of them do really seem surreal. You're like, come on, but when you see it, it's just like, wow,
it's funny too because
it's wild. It's wild.
It's funny because I've done clearly, easily over 500 investigations in my lifetime.
Right.
And people always ask me, well, so what are all your scariest, stories, experiences? And in all honesty, I could probably count 5 on my hand.
Same.
Out of all those investigations, maybe it's all being at the wrong place at the wrong time, but in all honesty, I don't have that many, terrifying experiences that I can talk about.
But what do you deem terrifying? Like, I don't personally terrify easily.
I don't ever get scared, except there's one time when I was very. I'm getting to that, David. I'm getting to that, David.
Except for that time, David.
There was that one time.
He's in that box above your head.
There was that one time I was really uncomfortable. And I had never experienced that in my life, and David was witness to that.
Aren't you lucky?
He can also validate that is out of character for me.
Right. So. Right. Just what you need to have a witness for, right? Worst freaking time. And who is it?
Too much, David. I got to kill you now.
Exactly. And it had to be David who's going to go, yeah, I'm never letting you live this one down. I love it. Yeah, that's the kind of friend you want, the one that never lets you forget.
But again, the collective lore of these places is often so much more fascinating than the fabricated nonsense that people want to come up with. And, sort of coming full circle, what we were talking about at the beginning of the show is that's kind of the point of these books, is to get the ghost stories out there and to get the information, as many of the facts as we can gather out there. And if we come up with something that is contradictory to what some other investigators have, I'm more than happy to look at their evidence and see what they have to support, what they're saying. Because I'll readily admit I'm more than willing to look at new information. You dug something else up. That's great. I want to see it. But please don't come tell me that your psychic aunt told you this is the reality or whatever. That's great. And that may be 100% valid. But without something else to support that, we really can't put that out and say, oh, this is what happened. Because there are too many occasions where there's so many people who claim psychic ability. And
I'm feeling a little personally attacked.
Go get him, Bubbles.
There's constant cases where we delve into these things.
I sound so tough when you call me Bubbles.
and there's something that's said by this psychic, and a lot of times you can't even find the original psychic who said it. So where's the rest of that story? What was this person picking up on?
And don't get us wrong. We're not trying to discredit all psychics or anything.
Not at all.
We believe there are people that are very gifted.
Absolutely.
I've experienced a lot of very gifted people in that field. It's just the problem that there's far too many charlatans posing as psychics and sensitives and mediums and all that. And those are the
I
ones.
was just kidding, Ross.
I know. But I'm just
personally, it would lower my credibility of myself.
I'm just addressing your listeners as well. We're not, trying to discredit any of those people, because there are some very gifted people out there, and we support them wholeheartedly. It's just, unfortunately, in our research, we've come across too many people that claim to be psychic, or and they may even have been psychic, and all psychics will admit this. They're not always on, and they're not always right either.
No,
so
absolutely not.
So you can't always take that information as proof to the paranormal. It's just another piece that we try to fit into the puzzle. Well, a psychic said this. Does it fit within this puzzle?
There's got to be cross-referencing. Something else like those.
There has to be. And I think everybody has a degree of psychic ability. And certainly when you've been in this field for a long time, a lot of people will develop that, not necessarily consciously. It'll just happen. And it's sort of the effect that police officers have, with the blue sense, where it just sort of happens naturally and organically from doing so many investigations. But if you solely rely on that, and that's your only point of reference and evidence, then it's a personal experience for you, and it's your personal belief and information. But you can't expect everyone to adhere to that and say, you saw a vision of that, that's the way it is. So, bring something else to the table and say, this is my impression, and here's what I believe supports that. And then we're on to something. And like Ross said, I mean, we've worked with some very valid psychics, and I've had plenty of times where I've had my own intuition about things, but you have to broaden that spectrum somewhat. I don't proclaim myself a scientific investigator. I think that our field is so experimental and so outside the realm of science that it really doesn't qualify as that. I take a very, very much a journalistic approach, I guess, is what I would say. And, I delve into things. I dig up the information. I investigate. And, I collate all of this and present, hey, this is what I found. And I never tell anybody this is absolutely what it is. I say, this is what I found.
Yeah.
Have at it and see what you get.
And, for me, I do try to be more scientific. So, as David has witnessed, I'll bring thousands and thousands of dollars worth of equipment on an investigation to help, support, what people are experiencing or claiming. So for me, I like, the readings, I like it when I work with a psychic and a psychic says there's something here and you can get a reading to validate there is something odd happening here.
I like that too. I like seeing and communicating with the spirit and you being able to scientifically say, that's the reading.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But the one thing,
validation is incredible.
And the one thing that we have to understand with ghost hunting, it is trial and error.
Yeah.
There is no set device that's going to tell you, yes, you have a ghost in your home.
And not too many sets of rules either, apparently.
There's the app on the phone. I forgot. Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's very difficult because there's, everybody has their own style, their own techniques. I think, people, kudos to them because there's a lot of people out there trying to develop new equipment or things just to test, to try, and I think if people didn't try, we wouldn't be any further ahead. I mean, look at Tesla,
Right.
Like he would come up with things and I mean, now we're all going, God, we should have just listened to Tesla,
Yeah.
But I think if people keep moving forward and sharing information just to try to keep us going forward in the field, I think that's fantastic. And I commend everyone who keeps trying to do that, like you guys. It's the same idea. You're giving the type of research that people may not all want to hear or read, because it's just like, well, we found something different, or because their way of investigating may have led them to maybe going just with what they're told. I don't like to be told. When I go into a location, or I have to bring in another medium, even though I have mediumship abilities myself. It's like I'm given all the information. So for me, it's completely contaminated. I can't use any of it, so I have to bring in people to say, okay, what do you guys get? Because I already know the whole story. I'm the one that everybody wants to talk to.
See, and I respect that. I have been a guest on investigation teams where I found out the psychic was the lead researcher.
You can't.
And now the psychic, you can't. You destroyed all your credibility.
That's right.
At being a psychic if you're already front loaded. Exactly.
No, I don't go in as a psychic. I've always gone in as a researcher. I'm not a practicing medium at all. I don't do readings. I don't do anything like that. It's not my interest. I've always been more interested in the scientific, and again, how scientific can you be? You're not in a laboratory. But I've always been interested in what the equipment does. I like to be in the field. I like to get my own experiences. I like to do the research on it. And I've always used, other mediums for that who go in and don't know everything that's going on, because you can't wear both hats. You can't.
Well,
you have to go in blind.
I think ultimately we'll make breakthroughs in the field by taking sort of a more quantum approach, a little bit of science, a little bit of research, a little bit of intuition, and sort of blending those things, because we're in uncharted territory. That's the bottom line. And, we just don't know what exactly is going to work, what is going to cause that deeper breakthrough. It might be some kind of new full spectrum camera or something, or just who knows. But that's why it is all very experimental. And, Ross and I have done lots of investigations together at this point, and we do try lots of different experiments and set lots of different things up to try to get responses and reactions. And, we've had some pretty cool responses from different things. We had, my gosh, we recorded a phantom gunshot at a location in Washington that was just kind of not what we were expecting at all, but I mean, clear as a bell.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
what
and
do
it
you
was
do then?
in the middle of the night, so the entire town was shut down. I mean, there was nothing going on.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. It kind of makes you feel like a little bit vulnerable, like the bathtub game.
Well, and the funny thing is, to validate that piece of evidence was the fact that we were going off of a story where it was an old brothel. And one of the stories is that one of the wives knew her husband was there, went into the brothel, kicked open the door where her husband was with the lady, and shot at him.
Oh.
She didn't kill him, but, she shot into the room,
Wow.
And one of the experiments we were trying, one of my favorite things to do is to try to evoke the time period, or the activities that were going on. So we had a group of volunteers who were kind of partying in a room and playing cards and going through the same actions essentially that went on during this incident. And, we were trying to get some kind of response from that. We were expecting something else, but, like we said, we ended up recording this gunshot. It was just pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty fantastic, especially when you do have the story to back it up.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. I think I like the stories where children witness things, because even though they can be the teller of tall tales for sure, they also look at it, like pure. It's just because they don't know what they're looking at. To them, they're just seeing this person, maybe because they haven't necessarily been taught that, this is a spirit individual. They don't have an understanding of it. So I always sort of lean towards what children have to say first, to see if they've been led or if it's an actual experience, and then sort of go from there. I love listening to what the kids have to say, because half the time they can see more that, the adults can't see. They're just little natural psychics are still open.
Yeah. Yeah. And, those are interesting to me. And honestly, so are reluctant witnesses. The people who have the stories, but they don't necessarily really want to share. And, I enjoy talking to people and getting them to share these accounts. And I've collected a lot of stories over the years, and people will say, okay, well, you can't use mine. After they tell me the story, I ask them if I can use the account anywhere. And sometimes they'll say no, but sometimes they'll say, well, yeah, but I don't want my name used, or, the location. And that just adds so much more credibility in a sense. Now, some researchers will say, well, you're not publishing the person's name. It can't be real. No, you don't understand. This person had this experience, and it affected them deeply enough that they just, they don't want to get on television. They don't want to be on a reality show telling their story. It's a personal experience for them, and that carries so much more weight.
Especially at a time when it's completely the opposite, where most people want the attention. They want their name in the book.
So.
Yeah, the 15 minutes. Yeah,
that's right.
Oh, I can't tell you how many investigations I've done where people are just like, can I do this show, or can I do this show? And I'm just well, I'm always happy to recommend people. Some people believe in well, if I can tell my story, then maybe somebody can learn from the experience. And some people are very genuine. It's the only way they have to give back. I always say, people say, what do you charge? I don't. It's just pay it forward to somebody else. Smile at somebody who needs it. Just do something good for somebody. That would make me happy. That's how you can repay me, is just do something good for someone else, and sometimes that's their way of giving back. So I'm like, well, it's between you and the producers. I don't have anything to do with it. But then I've had people who just, they're there solely to have an investigation done, to be on television. So I don't want to be any part of that. I've worked with people who have just been like, well, wanting to be, and I'm just like, oh, what the hell did I create? It's like a monster, but it's just, I don't know. It's a strange industry, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. There's enough out there for everyone, but there is a code of ethics to it. And I think a lot of, I mean, we have some phenomenal researchers, and many of the researchers that are really phenomenal, probably something we don't see on television, we've never heard of. They're behind the scenes, and then there are those who are out in the forefront, because it's the only way that, people are going to find you, is if you're out there and you're discussing, how you do things or how things should be done. And then you just get, the showboaters that are really out there, and they don't necessarily always do things wrong or right most of the time. So again,
it is, me and David have talked about this many a times, because we go, we were doing this before the television shows, and we've seen how much the media has changed the perspective of ghost hunting. Me and David both tell you, there were times in our lives where you didn't tell people you were a ghost hunter. Most people would just think you were, crazy,
So it gets so bad, where people come in, and I get it, people want group shirts and things, but I've had people specifically say to me, you're not coming in with a logo on your car or a t-shirt, are you? Because we don't want anybody to know we're having our house investigated. I'm like, what? Never done anything like that. But that was, but even that was when it just started becoming a thing. And I'm like, no, I don't do that. So.
Well, that's the parameters. You put up a website, you come up with a cool name, and you get matching T-shirts, and you're ghost hunters. There's nothing else that's prerequisite for that.
Michelle doesn't even park in your driveway, so don't worry. I've been with her. It's down the street.
Yeah,
not even in your driveway.
No, I just try to be very discreet. I've worked with, like famous people. I've worked with people who have owned, huge conglomerates within, cities, and they're like, nobody can know you're here. Okay. I promise. Should I sign something? It's very covert.
And you go in signing an NDA for a ghost investigation.
I know, it's just, but I understand. And then I've had people contact me, and they just want it everywhere. What we call, and you probably have done many of these or been asked to do cases like this, they just keep bringing everybody in, researcher after the revolving researcher door, just to see who's going to get what, and and it's like, okay, those are the kind of cases that maybe beginners should do, because it is a great place, to go and
I always tell people, if they want to get involved in this field, which is great, it's nice to have, the encouragement that this is cool to be a ghost hunter now. But I've always told people there's no reason why any of these newcomers should be dealing with clients. If you want to, dabble a little bit in ghost hunting, go to a haunted cemetery, go check into a haunted room in a hotel. There's plenty of them out there. Go to some of these haunted park or something like that.
Your ghost tour.
But
I used to do ghost tours.
Yeah, but don't be dealing with clients.
No, it's not fair to the families.
No, because
and it's happened so many times where these clients call us because they had some team come out and they're terrified because the team has told them, they got demons in their home.
The portal to hell is in the basement. Yeah.
And they did nothing to help them. Yeah. They just said, you got a demon. We're going to go now. Thank you. Yeah. And it's just like, okay, well, what do I do now that we've had the talk?
They're not trained. Like, I took counseling just so I could learn how to read body language and how to properly communicate with people. You get people who go in there making, like I say, invitations, show yourself, blah blah blah, intimidating, the whole intimidation factor. Then they leave, and the family's left there alone to pick up the pieces, and that's not right.
Right. And I'm in a situation
there is no training. That's part of the problem. There is no training.
No, but there's
not going to be any training.
No. And television isn't training.
Future. And that's the big problem, is that people take their training from television, and their credentials a lot of times are they've seen every episode of Ghost Hunters, so they must know what they're doing. But there are ways that you can get training to deal with people and situations. You can train as a journalist, you can train as law enforcement. There's a whole litany of things that you can train that you can learn that will train you to prepare for these kind of situations. But unfortunately, it just doesn't happen in this field. And like I said, it's not going to happen for the foreseeable future. There's a few people out there claiming to teach, to certify you in ghost hunting, which
there's no certification.
Or demonology.
Wow.
3 classes, you can be a demonologist.
Oh yeah.
I can't even accept the title, the name. I've had people say, "Oh, you're a demonologist." I'm like, no. I'm a student of the field. I'm a student in all of this. I keep learning something every single day. Like I learn something every time we have a guest come on. I learn something new. You guys, I listen to your stories. I learned about the freaking bath game and Charlie, what the hell? I didn't even know those things existed. I'm like, what? A bath game? So, no, but seriously, it's when we bring people on, it's people who are often at the top of their field or have left their mark somehow, or people who can, we try to bear in mind, everyone who comes on is going to educate our listeners. We have millions of people who listen to us at night. It's like, I want our listeners to feel like they've got something out of the show, not just an everyday, there's got to be something to it. And in hopes that somebody listens, that's what I'm hoping for, is that people can say, you know what, I walked away from listening to the show I learned something, and thank you for that.
Right.
My biggest focus has always been education, because as we've discussed, it's all a learning experience for us all. Each haunted location is just as different as the next. So each location is a whole new learning experience. But the fact of the matter is we've got the charlatans, the people that are looking to be the next lead team on the next television series, and that doesn't help matters.
No, it does not.
We need to get back to building credibility in this field. And the media has done a lot to hurt the credibility in the field, because they choose teams or investigators for their shows not based off of their experience. A lot of times these people are just answering a cast list that they saw published and said, hey,
casting
call, just saying, hey, I'm just looking for somebody who's into the ghost hunting and stuff, and they may have no experience whatsoever. Like David said, they've probably watched a couple seasons of Ghost Hunters, and now, hey, I'm an expert in this field, I could definitely be on your show. And to be honest, if people understand how they cast people, it's more about the character of the person rather than their actual experience. If you watch those, what was it, The Bachelorette or The Bachelor, you always find that the person that the person that causes the most drama is the person that always stays till the very end. They're never ever kicked off.
No, that's true.
That's because nobody
true.
normal is on that show, though. So it's pretty much anybody's game there.
Right. So the ghost hunting shows tend to be a lot of that as well. And I'm just trying to change that. I'm trying to educate people to have a better understanding of what's really happening in the true world of paranormal research. And it's hard because people are already set in their own ways on what their beliefs are, and
because it's drilled into them every single week as they sit on the couch and watch a show. They have their favorite shows. I have people who message me all the time, I loved you on the show. I'm like, but you're not seeing half the things I said.
Exactly.
You're seeing the fear factor, that one thing. I've turned down probably as many shows as I've accepted because it's just like, I got asked to do a show one time. And they're like, yeah, it's a series. You want to call it Ghost Sweepers? I'm like, get the hell away from me. What the freaking hell is that? Ghost Sweepers. It's about clearing houses. I'm like, I think I'm all right, but thanks for that.
Oh my God.
I think I know why David's laughing.
Oh my!
That was a really bad series that hit television, Southern Ontario, about 11 years ago.
Oh my God!
And then they hit
doing it again?
Show that I turned
that
down.
Was a bad show. I
turned this show down 4 times, and somebody else took it who I knew really wanted to do the show. And you know what? It got voted the worst show on Netflix when it came to Netflix. I'm like, yeah, score one for me. I said no 4 times, but it's just they don't care. I think you have to get to the point of standards, and there's some really great shows out there right now. And kudos, I have my favorites also, but then there's just some like I don't ever want to film again.
No, I've been cut from shows because I wouldn't give the director what he wanted. When they're interviewing me and he says, "Can you make the story scarier?" I'm like, no. Can you tell us that you'll never come here again? I'm like, no. I come to this place almost daily. Why am I going to go on national television and say, "Oh, I'm too scared. I'll never come here again"?
Can you tell us you were afraid in this situation? No, because I wasn't. No. Can you say this happened? No, that didn't happen.
My favorite is the taglines that they want you to read at the end, and then they just put them anywhere in the previews. And I remember, I won't forget, I heard you in my head because I spoke to you before, and I heard you say, "Don't say anything that makes you feel uncomfortable." And there was a few times, as wonderful as they were, there was a few times where I had to say, "That's not something I would say."
Yeah.
It's
would integrity. You say this about demons? No, I
wouldn't. You
can
go in with all the intentions and say all the right things, and all that stuff ends up on the cutting room floor.
And we don't want to discourage anyone from getting involved in the field, but you remember that don't leave out the term research. And I have people ask me all the time, well, how do I get involved? And there's a handful of things I tell them, and the first thing I say, you need to read. You need to read a lot, and I'm not talking about tweets, or Wikipedia entries. Go in and read about the history of the field. Read text from the early pioneers of the field, and read some of the current material that's highly rated. Find yourself a mentor. Not just any local team that's been together for 6 months. Who claims they have all the answers?
Well,
because if they say they have all the answers, they probably don't. I hear that all the time. People who've been in the field for a year and they've figured it all out. And I said to one guy, I said, you should take up needlepoint because you've got all this figured out. And I don't know why you're wasting your time in the paranormal now because you understand it all. Instant expert, after 8 months or whatever. So, understand that you don't have all the answers, and you're not likely to have all the answers. It's just not going to happen. I've done this since the 70s, and all I have are more questions.
I know.
I think that's how it should be, though. That's how you stay honest.
And it's funny, too, because, me and David talked about this before. It's just like a lot of these people that come into the field don't even know who our pioneers are in this field. You could say Harry Price, and they have no clue who Harry Price is.
Yeah, we actually had, I can't remember if you were with me or not, Ross, but I said something about Harry Price, and the response was, "You mean Harry Potter?"
Oh, no.
Yeah, sure. Harry Potter. Let's go with that.
Yeah, go with that.
Maybe that has to be a book that you guys do, the pioneers, mentors. You can put it on as your mentors, pioneers, people who led the way for the rest of us, who set standards for the rest of us, because there used to be standards. There still are, but it was a given. Never mind. There was a lot of charlatans in the, table tipping and, it's crazy. Yeah. I'm not talking about the Victorian psychic, crazy age of spiritualism, even though it was great. It was an era of our time. But, just like real hardcore research, like the Philip experiment, getting into real, maybe that would be something that people go, I've never heard of this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
maybe you
guys got to do it.
The problem that we have with today's ghost hunters is they're what we call lazy ghost hunters. A lot of them don't want to pick up a book. A lot of them want to get their information from a YouTube channel, or from watching the episodes, or using devices that simplify ghost hunting because they're suggestive, like apps on their phones, or other devices that have been altered to make it entertaining for ghost hunters. That is what we're facing today. You don't have a lot of people that want to do the real research. It's too much work.
But that's most of the work, though.
I know.
And they don't want to do in the field.
They don't want to do the tedious work either. They don't want to go back and listen to the recordings. They don't want to go back and watch their videos. They want to have an app that does it for them.
They want an They want a night out.
Yeah. You know, the funny thing is, you referenced the age of spiritualism, which I'm very fascinated with that period, with the Victorian period. And there's just so much rich and amazing history there. What's interesting is that in some ways we're kind of in a repeat of that cycle, because during the Victorian era, you had, some mediums that showed up, and suddenly there were just hundreds of them. They were everywhere. Right. And, there was all this interest in psychic phenomena, and everybody was kind of jumping on board. And these mediums were coming out of nowhere, left and right. And the thing is that there were a few genuinely interesting mediums during that time who were tapped into something otherworldly, but they were quickly kind of lost in the mass of others who jumped into the field and said, "Oh, I'm a medium too." And now we have the same thing. We have, there are some incredibly knowledgeable people in our field. Ross and I have a mutual friend, Lloyd Auerbach. How often do you hear Lloyd's name? The guy's done so much work. He's an incredible thinker about in terms of the parapsychology of this field, but you just don't hear about him because you've got all these fly by night. Look at this team, the Ghost Sweepers. I mean, they're look what they're doing. They might get a show.
Thankfully, I wasn't on that one. Yeah. None such Ghost Sweeper.
The point is, you've got just hundreds of them now coming from everywhere, and here's
feeding the need, the demand. They just can't get enough shows. Some of them, to me, I'm just like, who the heck thought this one up?
The audience has to remember it's entertainment. It's not, honestly, research anymore. Not like it was when it first started. No, look, that's why I'm not there.
Look at the one time Amelia had messaged a show, a radio show, and she said, this individual is very questionable, makes up a lot of stuff. And she was given the response of, it's entertainment. And I'm thinking, I don't want to do a show for freaking entertainment. Well, because if it's going to be entertaining, I want it to be educational too.
It was frustrating. That was frustrating beyond belief, because this person claimed, where I worked with missing children for years, and I still do. I work a lot with law enforcement agencies, and part of that is confidentiality and your integrity, which he has neither. And he was exploiting families, and families are setting up websites against him, saying he had nothing to do with my daughter's disappearance. He had nothing to do, not disappearance, sorry, of course not.
That's another show you went after. I was talking about a different.
Oh, see? But when I see that, I will be one of the first to contact them and say, I don't know, but here's some information. And I would hope that somebody would do that with anyone that they know is incredible.
The thing is if it's the need for the entertainment, the need to feel scared, the need for the, the suspense, I think takes away, from just, this is actually the way it is. I'm grateful. We've had some unbelievable people on this show, and it's always been educational. People leave us something every time they come on, and we have amazing reviews and emails from people, and we have millions of listeners, and that's the proof in the pudding is people are interested in what we're offering. And you guys are definitely entertaining. I'm not saying you're not, but you're also
Hey, I haven't even started my jokes yet. Come on.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes.
Wait, I have a question in the chat room. Okay, I do have a question in the chat room. Earlier when we were talking about games, Zarito in the chat room, and I feel bad because this was all the way at the top of the show, asked if you knew about the Devil's Game.
The Devil's Game?
I've never heard of it. I don't know if either of you.
I've heard of quite a few different types of games that they might label the Devil's Game.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is a lot of these stories get passed down, and get altered in different ways and get new titles to a game. But I can't identify a certain one that's just called the Devil's Game.
Yeah.
I don't either.
There's all kinds. There's like there's the Midnight Man. Of course, you got Bloody Mary. You also got what's the other Candyman? It's kind of like Bloody Mary, So there's all kinds of different variations of a rooted game. There's, as I've always said, there's always a root to everything, and people, due to their culture, their beliefs, will alter it in their own way. It's just like religion.
There's also a lot of stories of from traditional folklore of the devil making an appearance and challenging someone to a game or to a contest. And the whole idea is he's trying to win a soul. So, the person, I guess, would have to give us a little bit more information to know which one he's talking about. But, even... For instance, I'm sure the famous song, "The Devil Went Down to Georgia." I mean, that was based on the folklore from that region of the devil coming down and challenging someone trying to win their soul. In that case, it was a musical contest. But there are so many things in early lore that are referred to as being connected to the devil. Playing cards for a long time were considered wicked. The pack, they were the devil's deck, the devil's cards.
Right.
So,
actually,
so many different versions of this that go far back into tradition.
Tomatoes were considered evil by King Henry VIII. They said they were trying to poison them. The sweetness
King
was
Henry was a big
them
tomato. That's all I'm saying.
It was a big bag of syphilis, but that's another story. That's a whole other show.
So let us know. We've actually gone over because we've had a little tech difficulty. I have to be okay with the studio because they got hit with some of that storm that tore through Texas. So we've actually been recording. I went over an extra probably 20 minutes to half an hour just to make sure. We've got an extra 44 minutes. I've recorded this, so I'm going to have them just add it on, because I realized, probably like at about the 10:35 mark, I'm like, wait a minute, something wrong. Right. So we're going to record this. So this is actually the studio recording, so he can just do it part 1, part 2, splice it, whatever he's got to do. So we're still going to get all of this out. So tell everybody, we'll start with David, and how to find you and what you got coming up next. And we're going to go to Ross and tell us what are you going to do? You going to write another book?
Yes, we're going to write another book.
Well, sure.
I want to hear, but together.
My website is eerielights.com, and that has links to everything, to the Instagram and Facebook page and everything else. There's also eerilightspublishing.com, which is just a publishing company. You can get direct links to all the titles on there also. I had a book come out just this week that is the latest in the cryptid series I have been doing. This is Monsters of the Tar Heel State, focusing on North Carolina. Another incredible cover by Sam Sharon of the Beast of Bladenboro. And lots of incredible legends that I dug into with that series. And that particular title was a lot of fun to do. So that one just dropped this week. That's on Amazon. And the latest one that Ross and I have coming out is Haunted Prisons, which should be out probably sometime later March, I'm guessing. Again, there'll be links to that on all the pages too. And that is Ross? That's the 4th one in the series.
The 4th, right. And then we got the hotel one.
Right. So we'll have probably 2 more in this series out this year where
we'll have to bring you guys back on and time it. We timed this interview for Haunted Prisons, so we'll have to.
I told Ross that he doesn't get to pick the next one because he picked prisons, and that was half of my calls for him were, "Damn it, Ross, you're not picking the next one."
Stop it, Ross. Put those ideas back in your head.
No, but quite seriously, I mean, we did both agree to work on it, but there's so many different ideas that we've talked about and we have lined up for the series, and they're all interesting to us. So it's just kind of a matter of which one feels right to do next. I think we're both in agreement it's going to be something more lighthearted at the least, more interesting ghost stories. But
it can't be more lighthearted than the bath game. I'm sorry I'm harping on it, but I'm just like wow.
Well, wait till you read about Wait till you read about hide and seek alone. That one's creepier.
Yeah, that one is creepier.
I think I'm still scarred from the bash game.
If I have nightmares, I'm contacting you. That's all
there we go. Everybody send their freaking mail over to Ross for that one.
Books. Yeah. I have a few of David's books already, but I need to get the two of you together because these are just so interesting. I want to learn more. Thank you so much for your time.
So, Ross, yourself, how does everyone get a hold of you?
Well, I always encourage people, you could check out my group's website, aghost.org. That's the Advanced Ghost Hunters of Seattle, Tacoma. And
Seattle.
Seattle's been great. And then, of course, you can look me up on Facebook, Ross Allison. And I always encourage people to follow me because I do a lot of investigations. I do a lot of live feeds from Facebook, so you can follow me on an investigation. And also, if you're ever in the Seattle area after COVID, definitely look up Spooked in Seattle. We do a lot of the ghost tours in the area. So definitely check those out.
I wish I knew about that when I was there. I was there in 2018, and I love Seattle, and the moon really is that big. That's all I'm going to say. It really is that big. It's one of the most beautiful cities and best coffee in the U.S., just saying.
Well, next time you're in Seattle, let me know.
Absolutely. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you guys for coming on. We will do it again. Please let us know roughly when you start getting into those other two books, and maybe we can time it to get them both out. Put you maybe in for, spooky like Halloween time or something along those lines.
Sure.
That will be a lot of fun. Thank you for joining us. And we'll do it again. So now I have to sign us off because I'm sure I'm going to get when I'm done this. So
yeah,
that's okay.
It's always a pleasure talking to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Stay safe and well, guys.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Well, we have come to another awesome segment here on the Outer Realm. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Sorry for the tech difficulties, but I promise you will get the whole show because I was thinking and I recorded the rest of it. So huge thank you to David Weatherly and Ross Allison. And remember to stop by the United Public Radio YouTube channel and subscribe so you can join us for tomorrow night's show. Tomorrow night, I am pleased to say we're going to have Hamilton White and Carl Cookson of the hit TV series The Lost Relics of the Knights Templar, near and dear to me. So they will be joining us tomorrow night. You don't want to miss that one. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you all. Good night. See you tomorrow. Let's see if Joe's going to lock us off. It's always a mystery.
We could be here for a while.
Yeah, we'll be out there for a while.